Hey, everybody. I'm Jane.
And I'm Sarah.
And you're listening to the Medium Curious podcast, the show where we are working hard to make sure that the supernatural is just super.
That's hilarious. On today's episode, we are calling it Medium Fail. It's just our biggest, deepest fears as mediums.
And it happens.
And it happens, yes. But we're also going to talk about what a good reading looks like as well. So join us for
Wins and Fails.
Wins and Fails. Hey, beautiful Jane.
Hi, beautiful Sarah. Hi.
One of the first things we had talked about for this episode was calling it Medium Fail. Because that definitely happens. It also feels like a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility. I think both you and I feel a lot of responsibility in this role as a medium. And so you wanted to address, I think, was it the second episode when my Uncle Bob popped in? And you gave an impromptu reading right then and there. Do you want to speak to why you were a little uneasy about airing that?
Well, I hope that there's lots of established mediums along with the medium curious crowd that's joining us here in our listenership. And an established medium would say, it's weird that she asked questions, or, it's weird that, like the way the reading unfolded is not sort of up to a standard, I guess, is how I felt. And so I felt anxious about putting it up like, I was obviously in the moment and Uncle Bob did pop through, and then he did have a really cool message and it all made sense what was happening. But I did have like a little insecurity flurry of like, I was working from questions and I wasn't making statements. And that's kind of getting into some like, medium 201 or 310, or I don't know, can't remember how college courses work. But you know what I mean? Like, this is like what you and I are learning in our advanced mediumship courses. Like we're like, of course, still in our studies. And so my head just got a little spinny. That's all. Like I was like, it wasn't great.
Well, I just want to let you know that when you started identifying him, you were a little bit reluctant to talk about what he was showing you for what he looked like, because he did kind of have a jolly round belly. And
and that's what he was showing me. But
he was showing you, but I could feel your reluctance in bringing that forth. And I got to say, he's just the cutest man ever for showing you that, because not everybody in the spirit world, like if somebody is bald, sometimes they would never show you that. So it depends on what their personality is like,
Yes. Right. Yeah.
But the fact that he showed you that is pretty cute.
It's super charming. And that I was a little bit trying to protect his ego or whatever on the other side. Like, Uncle Bob, I don't want to talk about how you got the big old belly. But we got there, and I think we left it in. We left it in the episode because it was so crazy, right? Like your phone went bling, and then I was literally saying, "That's your Uncle Bob," and I didn't. And it was, and I never knew you had an Uncle Bob. I've met the other uncle whose name I don't have right now, who died before you were born, and he and I chat all the time. And so anyway, listeners, we just wanted to like have a little like look back and go like, little Jane got scared because she didn't want to be exposed,
Well, then maybe we should talk about what an ideal reading does look like then.
Yeah. Well, of course, that will vary wildly depending on which medium you talk to. But I'll just say my understanding, and I think we probably share a lot of this, and I want to hear your version, of course, is that there's that the sitter, the person that you're doing the reading for, doesn't talk really much at all, especially at first. It's the medium's responsibility to open up a link, listen for folks on the other side, and then get a bunch of information in to clarify who we're talking to. So just using Uncle Bob as an example, you wouldn't say anything. And I would be like, I have a person here. I feel like this is an uncle. I'm hearing uncle. He's showing me that he's quite wide. It's super cute the way he's saying it. He is also talking about magic. He's showing me like a bunny and a hat. Would you understand magic? Like I would just be getting all of this information. And then at a certain point, I would be like, what if that made sense? And you would be like, yes, wide, yes, magic, yes, uncle, but the other side or whatever, like you would kind of help me understand what information was accurate and what information wasn't accurate. And then we would get into all the messages and all the yumminess. And then I think it would open up a little bit more where the sitter would talk more. But that's my understanding of kind of like an exemplary reading.
Absolutely. That's mine too.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, I think showing the sitter that their loved ones are still there by bringing in evidence that you wouldn't have no idea otherwise. I love giving readings to people I have never met and I don't know anything about them before the reading. So when I'm sitting there and I feeling someone come in, feeling their presence come in, and I hear mom, and then I start to get an idea of what their personality's like. And then I can say, I feel like I have your mom here in spirit. And they say, yes, then the link starts to get stronger and I can start to bring in more and more and more information. And so that to me is a fun, easy reading where you're just getting, I think we were talking about like the trickle of information and then like the big waterfall of information. When that connection is strong, then I start to get feelings. I start to see like little movies. I start to see memories.
Yes.
And feelings of situations, and then messages and hopes, and maybe sometimes acknowledgments of things that they wish that they had done differently in their lifetime. All of those beautiful things start to come through once the connection gets strong. And that's the beauty and the magic of a good reading. But they don't always go like that, do they?
They don't always go that way. And when you mentioned the trickle, this was our pre-game conversation, listeners. We were kind of talking about how sometimes in a reading, it'll be like trickle, trickle, drop, drip, drop. Like, I'm seeing a toolbox. That's all I've got. I just see a toolbox and I'm going, I've got a toolbox. And it's kind of up to me not to go, was he a construction worker? Was he, like, it's really not my job to understand why I'm seeing a toolbox, but it's pretty hard for an ego, like a person, like a me, not to be like, I understand it. And therefore I'm going to unpack it. And I'm going to open the toolbox and I'm going to say a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with that spirit, just because my mind has gone on a trip. So that's one great way to fail. It's to see something and decide for yourself what that thing means. And so that's one way we go astray pretty often, I'll say.
Right. Trying to make up a story to fit the information that we're getting.
Yes.
Yes. That is very easy to do. You kind of want to fill in the whole picture.
Yes.
But you can't really do that. You can only go with the information that you're being given. So that is a really hard thing as a new medium, is to decipher what is the information that I'm being given versus what am I filling in? Like, am I filling in all of the rest of the picture?
Well, especially because, and I think you and I operate a little bit differently. And I loved hearing you talk about how you, how did you say it? You said so beautifully in a recent episode when we were kind of introducing ourselves more. You said that you fit into the pocket of the music, or you said something like that. Like you fit into the sound that you're playing with another musician. It's sort of like
you blend into it.
Blends, and spirit blends with you and you blend with me. And because I'm a filmmaker and I'm a kind of more visual human, I do one of my main Claire's is clairvoyance, which is the ability to see, right? So then I joke that it's emoticons gone wild for me sometimes, because I'm like, rocking chair, horse, like pond. And now I'm seeing it, and so I have to sort of like unpack a bunch of visuals. So, I'm obviously still in development. I'm still working. I'm finding my way, but I will sometimes need help from my person that I'm working with, my sitter, to be like, why am I talking about a rocking chair? And then, it's also my job to wait a hot second. And usually spirit can be like, because this rocking chair was in the bedroom that the person sitting in front of you was raised in, and or whatever. Or they'll go, rocking chair, I understand, So
well, that's also why the sitter's job is important too. I mean, they're not supposed to be feeding us information. They always say, don't feed the medium.
Feed the medium.
Right.
Don't feed the medium.
Don't feed the medium. Because number one, you don't want to put things in their head. And number two, you want them to get it on their own. So it's proof. Mm-hmm. But there does need to be some reaction that helps. So it always helps me when I hear a sitter say, oh yeah, I know what that is. Or yes, that makes total sense to me. Because then that lets me know that I'm in the right direction. I'm in the right area, and I can keep moving forward with that information that I'm getting.
So you can encourage the medium, just don't feed them.
Yeah, encourage the medium, don't feed the medium.
We once did a kind of combined, like we were reading together for someone else. And if like the opposite kept happening, remember, they would be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's a little hard to hear. Okay.
That is. I know. I recently had a reading where I was being shown things and it was kind of the absolute opposite. So
the opposite game.
The opposite game. Right. I think spirit was just trying to show me, like, for instance, like I don't know if I should give for instances, but like you see like a young puppy jumping around, and actually the dog was very, very old and very slow. So that kind of thing where it's like, nope, totally wrong. It was like, oh, but it was the absolute opposite. Right?
Yeah. I know. I wonder what that is. It's almost like I just got the image of like an eyeball, how our eyeballs actually perceive it upside down and then our brain flips it. Sometimes I think opposite day is like, I need someone to tell me we're having opposite day. But like that does happen. Exactly that. I'll be like, opposite day. That's fun. Hopefully they're like, I guess that's what I want to say. And you started to say, like, there is a responsibility of the sitter in that they, it's almost like they hold the gate a little bit energetically. So they don't say anything, but I do feel like it's helpful. And I'm not going to say it's anybody's responsibility to do anything other than ours, but it is helpful when they're like open, when they're like, or they're listening and they're waiting to hear. They're open. I'll just say that it helps me if a sitter's like open.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful. Yeah,
I'm reading for someone who's like, this is all crap. I want no part of it. And then you're just like waiting.
Yeah.
For spirit to really deliver some true magic, because that person is not really there for it.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone that I've had recently where that's happened. But I mean, I have had hard readings where I'm like, oh, that doesn't really resonate. Nope, that really doesn't make sense. And then, if that goes on for like 5 minutes, I'll say, I'm so sorry. I am just not able to connect today. There's something going on and I'm just having a really hard time. Yeah. I think I'm so sorry that you wasted your time right now. I just need to call this off. Obviously, like, you reschedule with somebody else or absolutely don't pay me. Yeah. I have no problem doing that. I will not continue to go down the road of stumbling and
hitting walls.
It's good to know. It's like, okay, this is just not working out right now. So
yes. Yeah, I have that clause in my readings too. If that at the 10 or 15-minute mark, we're just not finding each other. I'm not finding your people. They're not finding me. We're not, even psychically, nothing's coming through, that we just go, oh, with so much love, let me give you your money back, and we're done. Like, this wasn't meant to be. It's only happened, a couple times, but I will say, boy, it's painful.
It does. It is not a good feeling. It is absolutely not a good feeling. Can I share with you an article that I just read? And I think, we want to prove that we are valid, that this is valuable work, and that this is legitimate. And maybe it's the majority of people out there that do not think that this is valid. So let me just read to you what I just came across this article in the New York Times, and it's called At Sundance, AI, Psychics, and Other Ways of Connecting with the Dead. So it's all about documentaries at Sundance, and a lot of it's about, one of them's about AI, and then it goes on to talk about a documentary that came out, Look Into My Eyes. It's a sociological portrait that taps into the same longing for connection with loved ones who have passed, but it takes a more mystical direction. And then it goes on to say that it actually focuses on the psychics themselves, the reasons they've come to their work, and what they believe they're actually doing in their sessions. And the film is marvelously nuanced and fascinating in its examination. Is this performance? Is it real? And if it brings peace to the living, does it matter? I mean, so that's, I think, where so many of, the general public, the mainstream, is with mediumship. And that's why it feels so very important to me. And I know all of the other mediums that we study with and that we have in our mediumship community
circles. Yeah.
For us to have that integrity and to show up and give the very, very best reading that we can.
Yes, right. Because to some degree, we feel like we're proving something for the whole of us. Like with each kind of reading or each interaction, it's like, oh, you're representing a whole crowd of people who are otherwise not necessarily supported, I guess. And we have talked about that a little bit on here. And so then the failure feels like almost a bigger failure.
Yeah.
Somehow. Or ideally that's not what we do. And we can talk about our solutions for when that feeling hits. But,
right.
I watch a lot of those Netflix sports shows like Match Point, the one about the tennis players, or the golf one. It all started with the F1 series, which is, and what'll happen is if a particular person feels like they're representing a whole group, the pressure just like triples and quadruples for them, because they feel like, hey, I'm repping either a country or, Black folk or whatever. They feel like they have to perform at a better level because otherwise people might not, believe in the whole crowd. Right. And
that makes total sense.
It makes
responsibility.
Total sense.
Yeah.
It's so not fair to that tiny little human trying to just hit the ball back over the net to be wearing all that responsibility. And so I would say the same to us. It's like, golly, we're sort of out on this cutting edge of what's acceptable in our sort of, normal circles, to the point where, I mean, I will get back to failure in a second, but like when someone asks you what you do, what do you say, Sarah?
I say I'm a musician.
Yes.
I'm a mom.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a first thing out unless I've talked to spirit in advance of the conversation and I know that person is open, or in the moment I see a little sparkle twinkle over them and I'll be like, oh, okay, this is a safe space, you know?
Yeah. It's a definite like conversation stopper, you know,
oh
you just
my God.
like you say, I'm a medium. And then, you know, I've even had people like take a couple steps back.
Totally. Here come the crickets in this. My favorite is the look left when I feel like, oh my God, I'm a medium. And they look over my shoulder. It's like living in LA again. They're like, let me see who else is at this party. So I don't have to stand here and talk to you. Crazy.
So then why do we do this? Why do we do this, Jane?
Why do we risk failure? Why do we risk ridicule?
Because it's so magical and amazing and wonderful when it works well and life-changing.
Exactly.
So can I talk about you said, you know, developing medium, but this was many years ago. This is before I even had any idea that I was a medium. I saw you work a whole entire room. You gave a huge demonstration. And again, I'm going to say my best friend Eliza's house. She's now been on every single episode.
We need to get her on quick. She's not such a mystery, magical mystery woman.
But I don't even know how many people were there. There were a lot of people there, like
a dozen
people,
14,
yeah,
something like that.
And you ended up at the end of it, you brought through somebody for each person there.
Wow.
And it was amazing. But you started off with this gentleman who nobody could take.
Oh, was that?
Do you remember? Yes, it was I think it was. It was very close in the very beginning.
Oh wow.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I kept seeing what I thought was a football field. We were out on a field, and so I kept saying football. This fellow, and then I'm trying to remember what other evidence I had, Sarah.
Like military.
Oh yeah.
And very stern personality, and nobody could take it. And then all of a sudden, my husband was like, "Oh my!" I think you might have even gotten a name, like close to a name.
Yeah,
I think Arthur, and that was my husband's grandfather. Huge personality, like insane big personality, and I'll have something to tag on to that in a second. But it didn't dawn on us that it could possibly be him, because my husband wasn't expecting him to come through. He was expecting his dad to come through. Right. I wasn't expecting him to come through. And then when it finally clicked,
is rugby. That was part of
football is rugby. That's
failure
right.
There. Yeah.
Different country,
different sport. And so your husband wasn't sitting there thinking, I don't know anybody who plays football who's stern, you know?
Right. But then the message that he brought through was really beautiful and had to do with extending an olive branch.
Oh yeah,
to David's mom, and over how he treated
her,
his daughter-in-law. Yeah.
Chills. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right. So there I am. We've invited, a dozen people. Your dear friend Eliza had put out this beautiful food. It was like this whole thing. Like, what was I even thinking?
You were fearless. You went up, you did it. It was amazing. It was great.
But to start out like that, I actually really like working in a group like that, because I knew 12 to 14 other spirits were behind him. And I was like, we might have even said, like, let's set him down for a minute. We'll come back. Who's next? Like, oh, here's somebody's mom. And I got blah, 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 blah. And there's mom. And then we've got the conversation, and then we've got the message. And then, okay, next. But it's almost like a kick line. I'm like, next, because they're all right there, because there's so much energy in the room.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, standing in front of a crowd, it can be a little intimidating.
Well, I was just so impressed. I was like, wow, this is, and I always went back to that as like, well, I've seen Jane work the whole entire room and bring through a dozen people for everybody. So, I've never done that. But that
but you
is a
should.
huge feat. Oh, I don't know. Very daunting.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think it was almost my ignorance that was so good. Like it didn't occur to me that it wouldn't work. You know, I was like, well, of course it'll work. So sometimes that sort of like swag and confidence is like what gets you where you need to go. Because I just had it. That's because when I first started, I was trained by this really amazing medium named Lillian Suarez. And she was just like, do 5 readings a week. Just do 5 readings a week. You don't have to charge. You can charge. It doesn't matter. Just do 5 readings a week. And then I had some friends getting together in LA and I was like, hey, let's do a bunch of people. And every same thing. Everybody came and everyone got readings and really profound stuff came through. And I was like high as a kite after that one. And I was like, yeah, so this is something I can do. So I just assumed I could do it. Sometimes the more I study, the more I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this.
Okay, so then let's talk about that, the confidence, the not doubting yourself, because that is really important in mediumship. You have to be able to trust that what you're getting, what you're being given from spirit is indeed correct.
Right. Yes. And that's a mantra that I work with that I think really helps me is like, well, spirit knows, spirit knows, spirit knows. I don't know, spirit knows. If I'm not getting rugby versus football, that's my bad because I don't have information about rugby at my fingertips. But spirit's on it. Spirit's on the job. Like as long as I get the hell out of the way, we're going to get somewhere good.
Yeah. And you did. You brought through a beautiful message after that.
Can I share a really good fail that turned into a win?
Yes.
Okay. So I was at Arthur Findlay College, speaking of Arthur, and it was like this kind of intimidating moment where they were like, okay, you're going to do a reading for someone and you're going to have an audience, like someone sitting there just listening. So now that's one thing to have an audience member, but it's another thing to have a medium who's like in training, who knows what they're doing, sitting next to you and watching you. And they might even see the spirit you're seeing, which is fascinating. So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I see a big yellow hat, like a 5-gallon yellow hat. And I say to this woman, I was like, I've got a giant yellow hat. And she's like, no idea what you're talking about. But
no.
I'm like, it's so big and it's so yellow. And so I wasn't thinking about the fact that spirit knows I'm a filmmaker and I'm into TV and like all these kind of media. And so I'll just say the reading went on and like finally the spirit and kind of even came into me a little bit, was like touching my hair. The spirit's like, oh my God, your hair. I love your hair. And I was like, this is hilarious. This person loves my hair. Why are we doing high kicks? Oh my gosh, I'm on stage. We're doing high kicks. And then they recognized the spirit as their friend who was part of Bob Fosse's Follies. And like this really like amazing trans person that was their dear friend who had crossed, like 5 years before. And then I said, wait, would you mind sharing their name? And she said, George.
Oh,
and I was like,
Curious
you got
George.
it. It's Curious George.
The man with the yellow hat.
So how brilliant is George?
That's an amazing clue. That's such a great clue.
So great. But
and unless you've had little kids, you may not know that.
Well, I did have a little kid. And
that's right. Like, that's why.
Yeah. And you too. You were like, oh, that's obviously Curious George.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But somebody who hasn't read those books recently would have no idea. A big, giant yellow hat. What
are you talking about? And then I think what I loved about that moment and what I have to remember now as I continue to do this work and kind of, it's a little bit more pressurized for me now, actually, because this is what I do full time. It's just how easy it felt. Like I was like, set it aside. It'll make sense later. Like set it aside. It'll make sense later. Yep. Set it aside. It'll make sense later. And it did. And it was hilarious. We were all dying at that point. And that, when all that laughter and all that energy goes zoom, 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 then spirit can get through even easier.
That's right. Yeah, because you have to have a raised vibration in order to connect with spirit. Mediums talk about that all the time, raising our vibration. And because spirit needs to lower their vibration in order to be able to connect with us. So when we raise our vibration as much as we can, and by raised vibration, that means being joyful, being happy, being excited, laughing. I think that medium circle, or the demo that you did, you started off by telling some medium jokes, which got everybody laughing. But that, you said, this is raising the vibration of the whole group, which will make it easier for me to connect to spirit.
That's right. Comedium.
That's right.
That's what I was doing, a little bit of comedium. Oh my gosh. Do you know that we have already been chatting for our allotted time of chat?
Oh, you're kidding. Well,
no, we have just had so much fun talking about failure.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I hope this feels helpful, friends, to hear that, we're just little humans who are doing our very best. And sometimes we're not going to do it. But boy, we care and we're really working hard for you. And just know that these mediums that you're talking to or that you're sitting with are little humans.
Even you yourself.
You yourself might need a little. Oh, and that's what we can close with. We can talk about how we handle those situations that, if we have to hang up because it didn't connect or we didn't have a good reading and we felt like failures. What do we do? Sarah, what do we do?
Well, we have to be so kind to ourselves, because if we are not kind to ourselves, it does not go well. And when I'm at a loss and I'm just trying to console myself, I always say, what would Liz Gilbert do?
WWLGD.
I know. And she would talk to herself. So I talk to myself and I say, oh, honey, you're
sweetheart.
Okay. You're loved.
Oh, sweetheart.
You did the best that you could do, and you're still worthy and you're still adored. And
yes.
That's how we feel about all of you, dear listeners.
You're adored. And just ask yourself, WWLGD, because she's got you.
All right. Until next week, then.
Until next week. Love you.
Love you all.
Love you all. Love everyone else. Bye, curious friends.
Bye.
Medium Curious is made possible
by Jane Morgan Editing.
Sarah Rathke made the amazing music.
And Gigi Hawkins, podcast consultant.
Our logo was created by Eric Allen.
Kyle Hansen McKee, photography.
And the dogs under the desk in Hawaii are Kalea and Domino.
And Trixie in California.